Ladies and gentlemen, what a wonderful speaker. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the man voted Politician of the Year, the only party leader of conviction in our country, the man who will lead us to victory in the European elections next year. Please welcome Nigel Farage.
Wow. Good morning, everybody. We've been on the march for 20 years, 20 long years. There have been many failures, many disappointments, many ups and downs, lots of leaflets delivered, and over the years, many deposits lost. And of course, we've been roundly abused and laughed at and mocked and derided. But despite that, over the course of the last 18 months, something remarkable is happening, and we are now changing the face of British politics. Jane Collins coming second in the Rotherham by-election with our percentage up by 16% and a tremor sent through Westminster and into Downing Street. Richard Elvin in the North East coming second in the Middlesbrough parliamentary by-election and then second in South Shields. Now, of course, they weigh the Labour vote in South Shields, but they must be using imperial measurements up there because Richard's share of the vote went from 0 to 25% in the space of 3 weeks. Truly remarkable. And then, of course, the by-election in Eastleigh, where, again, in a by-election of 3 weeks, Diane James secured over 11,000 votes. Our vote share was up by 24%. Had it gone on for another week, we'd have overtaken the Lib Dems, but I'm quite sure, Diane, that in 2015, when you stand there in the general election, you will win that seat. I said at the time of Eastleigh that we were going to become established as the third party in British politics. And we now have over 30,000 members and we're rising fast. And by the time of the next general election, we will have the third highest membership of any party in this country. And we're going up at a time when all the rest are going down. And we're pleased with what's going on. And they're appalled and the commentators are simply stunned and amazed. Now, in 8 months from now, we have the European elections, and of course we have many council elections. Now, we're going to be fielding sets of candidates in both. Indeed, we intend to put up thousands of candidates for those local elections, with a big emphasis and a big push here in London, where all the local seats are up for grabs. And I'm not going to take anything for granted, but I think we might do quite well next year. In fact, my ambition and my conviction is that we can come first across the United Kingdom in those European elections and cause an earthquake in British politics. also believe that in a funny way, the council elections on that day are even more important to UKIP than the European elections themselves. This year, we made a great breakthrough on May the 2nd, getting 23% of the vote across the English counties, and we now hold 227 council seats. I think we've got every opportunity on May the 22nd next year to win hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of council seats up and down this country, and to build up the kind of clusters of support that we'll need to go on and win seats in the general election of 2015. So it's a big day for us next year. And my goodness me, we are changing the political agenda in this country. Because earlier this year, David Cameron said he believed there should be a referendum on our membership of the European Union. And that wouldn't have happened without us. And I think you would also see our influence in the debate on immigration. But perhaps significantly, and something I'm very proud of, we made our position on Syria absolutely clear, that we are sick to death of this country getting involved in an endless series of foreign wars without object. We made it clear that we thought voting no, voting against war in Syria was the right thing to do, and I'm struck now that many of the backbench politicians in Westminster are now more scared of the UKIP vote in their constituencies than they are the whips in their own party. Well, this change has been gradually building over the years, and it's partly hope, it's partly fear, it's partly disillusionment, but it's partly, from us, engagement. You see, when we launched this party, only 17% of the British people thought we should leave the European Union. Today, that figure is 67%. The British Social Attitude Survey shows that Britain is moving in UKIP's direction. But it's not just doing that on the question of the European Union, vital though that is. It's doing it on many areas of our national life. On welfare, you know, we're clear. The benefit system should be there for the needy and not there as a lifestyle choice. On education. On education, we're the only party that actually believes in social mobility. You know, all the rest of them have effectively pulled the ladder up. From people who come from poor backgrounds, particularly in our big cities, and I think UKIP championing the idea that we need selective education and we need grammar schools. And once again, we're changing the national debate. And yes, on immigration, we've certainly changed the debate on immigration. This is a debate that I think is vital. It is the single most important, biggest question that is currently urgently facing our country. And it affects everything. It affects the National Health Service, it affects our broader economy, it affects primary school places, public services, and yet the establishment have done everything they can to close down debate on this issue and to decry anybody that dares to discuss the issue somehow as being bad and racist. And we will not have that. This issue must be debated. And I say that, I mean, we're a nation that has always been open-minded to immigration. Of all the countries in Europe, we've been the most open to people from different cultures coming here from around the world. But it is a question, ladies and gentlemen, of scale. Because more people settled in this country in 2010 than came here for the previous 1,000 years. It is totally and utterly out of control. Now, I'm not against immigration, far from it. And there are many people that come to Britain who we really should look up to and admire. They're people that come here, they work hard, they pay taxes, they contribute to our life, they obey the law, they're not a drain on the health service. Of course we welcome, and we understand why people want to come into this country. But we've got to control it. And I think I'm speaking here as much for the settled ethnic minorities in this country as I am for families who've been here forever, when I say that 500,000 new arrivals every year is totally unsustainable and not good for our way of life. You really haven't got to be a rocket scientist to work this out. We talk about it honestly, directly, and my goodness me, we've taken some stick for it. And many of the commentators in London, I think, are bewildered by this. But you go out there, go into Telford and Aylesbury and Kettering and Buxton and Harrogate, go out there. Well, it's all a long way from London. But actually, every time I go out onto the stages and speak, we now get audiences of 500 or 600 people coming along. This debate is filling theatres up and down the land. And whenever I ask for a show of hands, over 80% of those big audiences are not members of UKIP. They're members of the great British public who are interested and engaged, and they want to be here, and they want to listen. And the idea that people are disconnected from politics is wrong. People aren't disconnected from politics. They're disconnected from the current career class of politicians who will not have an open, honest debate. I'm often asked, well, who is the typical UKIP voter? Define the UKIP voter. Well, I have to say, when you look into those audiences, it's very difficult to do because we have a range of the whole of our society in that room. We have workers, employers, self-employed, big businesses, corner shop owners, rich people, people in the middle, people who are struggling, people young, people old, people unemployed, people, few of whom have left-wing or right-wing opinions. They're mostly people roughly somewhere in the middle. Very few of them are political activists. Some of them haven't voted for anybody for the last 20 years, but they are good, decent, patriotic, hard-working, law-abiding British people, and frankly, I feel that we are now the only party that stands up and speaks for them. And certainly what brings this alliance, this eclectic mix of people together, one thing they've all got in common is they're fed up to the back teeth of the cardboard cutout careerists in Westminster who look the same, sound the same, and are never prepared to put the interests of Britain and the British people first. And just look at them. It's like a game, isn't it? Spot the difference between the politicians. They're all desperately themselves fighting to hold the middle ground, which they can't even find or define. They're made up of focus groupies, triangulators, dog whistlers, politicians who daren't say what they really mean. And we're rather different to that, aren't we? Because we're unafraid to stand up and say it as it is. We don't go around the country saying, Are you thinking what we're thinking? We don't need to do that. No, we stand up and we tell it how it is, and whether people agree with us or not, at least they know where we stand. I'm proud of that. Now that's why UKIP is the most independent-minded body of men and women who have ever come together in the name of British politics. For that I have no doubt, but that does present occasional difficulties. Yeah, we've got some people with rather overactive Facebook accounts that cause difficulty. We have some who make public pronouncements that I would not necessarily have chosen to make myself. Indeed, I had a blistering row with Godfrey Bloom at a Strasbourg restaurant the other evening, and I don't think we're going to be invited back. And he wants to fight for his beliefs, and I was arguing we've got to stick to the big messages. But I mean, that's not uncommon. I have policy disagreements sometimes with Stuart Wheeler. But you see, the essence of our recent success is our ability to push the boundaries of debate, to be free-thinking, And in doing that, we've succeeded in changing the national debate on many, many issues. And so, if the choice is between our being browbeaten through political correctness to stay within the current received wisdoms or to be a party of free debate, then be in no doubt we must be a party of radical alternatives and of free speech. There is, however, one important qualification. We firmly, fiercely oppose racism, extremism and the sectarianism of the left or right. Indeed, we're the only party in Britain who have banned former BNP members from joining our party. So we know where we stand. We know exactly where we stand. Now, it's not all going to be easy. And I've no doubt that we are worrying and shaking the establishment to such an extent that they really don't quite know what to do about us. What they do know is if they take us on the big issues and debate them openly with us, they will lose. They will lose. So what they've decided to do is they've decided not to go for the ball, but to go for the player. And I'm afraid we will be subject to a whole series of smears running up to next year's elections and the elections beyond. And I also know that whilst that's tough for the individuals, in some ways it's even tougher for the wives, husbands, children and broader family. This is a rough, tough old game, and I would ask you, as our party faithful and as our loyalists, to remember that those up at the front leading the charge for UKIP need a lot of strong physical and moral support from you as well. So I ask for that, please. Now, we've been here for 20 years, and some people keep asking, well, what is UKIP now? First, you began to talk about the European question, then you talked about immigration, then you talked about grammar schools, and I'm going to attempt to redefine today what UKIP is with this card. UKIP is a free-thinking, egalitarian party opposed to racism, sectarianism and extremism. UKIP is dedicated to liberty, opportunity, equality under the law and the aspirations of the British people. We will always act in the interests of the British nation, especially on immigration, employment, energy supply and fisheries. We know that only by leaving the European Union can we regain control of our borders, our parliament, our democracy and our ability to trade freely with the fastest growing economies in the world. A referendum to allow the country to decide this matter will create the greatest opportunity for national renewal in our lifetimes. That is my definition of UKIP. It's all the things our detractors don't want you to believe. It is optimistic. It is open to the world. It is the complete opposite of being insular. We want to be out there trading with countries that have growth rates of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%. Not hemmed in by the European Union. We need to open ourselves up. We need to open ourselves up, particularly to English-speaking countries within the Commonwealth. Wouldn't that make sense? And these are our real friends in the world. In fact, many of those countries have as their head of state the Queen, not Herman van Rompuy. I don't want to hear anymore people talking about we need to have a European future. Britain does not need a European future. Britain needs a global future, and we can only have that as an independent country, free to trade with whomsoever we choose. That is the positive looking forward trade message of this party. The truth, of course, is we should never have joined this union in the first place. Frankly, because we're different. We are different. Our geography, our history, our institutions produced by that history make us look and think differently. This is not the Love Actually speech, but it is a recognition, perhaps, of things that were said at the first UKIP conference, and they were right 20 years ago. You know, our history gives us common law, civil rights, habeas corpus, the presumption of innocence before guilt, the right to a trial by jury. On the continent, they have an entirely different system where confession is the mother of all evidence. And 4 years ago, I fought hard, and others did too in this party, I fought hard for a lad from North London called Andrew Symeou. He was charged with manslaughter on statements extracted by the Greek police and later withdrawn. He was taken on a European arrest warrant. He was held for 10 months in the most appalling conditions in a Greek jail. He was then detained in Greece on bail for a further 4 years and then walked free when the prosecutor dropped the case without charge. And I want us as the government and opposition debate in the next few months what parts of European social law and order and social justice we should opt into or opt out of. I want to make our position absolutely clear. Given that history of ours, we say the European arrest warrant is a total abomination to those who care about freedom and justice. And we've much to be proud of. You know, we are the country that has had this great tradition of free speech. Throughout Europe, England was known as the land of liberty. Here you could dissent. Here you could think freely. Independent minds and voices. And actually, UKIP, in many ways, is not an oddity. We're actually in the mainstream of British political life through the centuries. Now, I was first elected in 1999 to the European Parliament, believing that we were a square peg in a round hole for all the reasons I've just given. And I thought we shouldn't be part of it, but if the rest of Europe wanted it, that was fine by me. I now believe that the European Commission has hijacked the very concept and name of Europe. They've adopted a flag, an anthem, a president. No one's ever heard of him, but never mind. They've got a president, and through their mad Euro project, they've driven tens of millions of people into poverty. Through their climate change obsession, they've destroyed much of industry, much of manufacturing industry across Europe. And their refusal to listen to people or offer them any alternatives is now beginning to lead to the kind of very extreme nationalisms that the project was supposed to stop in the first place. And I can declare today that we in UKIP are actually the true Europeans, because we want to live and work and breathe in a Europe of free, democratic, sovereign states that trade and cooperate together but are not governed by these monstrous institutions. And I don't just want the UK out of the European Union, I want Europe out of the European Union too. Now, if we'd ever been told the truth, of course, we'd never have joined. We'd never have joined something that gave away the supremacy of law. We've had to absorb, in the British economy, 120,000 pages of close-type legislation since joining what was laughably called the common market. And what a shower of directives comes on our businesses. We finished up with process, compliance, inspection and regulation. They've taken over from production, leadership and enterprise. We've got to reverse that culture. We've got to free up British business. We've got to get European law off their backs. I spent 20 years working in the financial services industry. Yes, I had a job before doing this. I know it's very unusual. And of course, it's Britain's biggest industry. It's about 10% of the British economy. But it's not all about the City of London. No, no, no. It's about Cardiff, Birmingham, Newcastle, where all these different back offices operate with people involved in the industry. And it's not all about the bankers. It's about insurance, reinsurance, stocks and shares, pensions, commodities, a whole range of industries in which Britain is a world leader. But I'm afraid it's now irrelevant to that industry whether we have a Conservative government, a coalition government, or a Labour government, because we have transferred management of Britain's biggest industry over to a very charming Frenchman who doesn't wish our industry well. We've got to take back control of managing Britain's biggest industry, surely. These are the things that we have to do to move on. You know, we've given up control of our economy progressively. We're giving up our own concept of civil rights has evolved since Magna Carta, and we've got to stand up and defend those rights. And it's very interesting that Europe now has supplanted our system, our civil rights system that we've had for all these centuries. It's supplanted it with a human rights charter. And under that charter, they can hold Andrew Symeou in Greece on a trumped-up charge for 4 years, yet we can't deport a rapist or a murderer because they have a right to a family life. We need to throw this in the bin. And our own politics, frankly, has become a charade. You might have noticed that since May the 2nd, all the parties now talk tough on immigration. It's like a bidding war that's been going on between Cameron, Clegg and Miliband to sound who can be the toughest on immigration. I have to say, some of their right-wing rhetoric really worries me. But it's a charade. It's a charade. All this talk from David Cameron that he'd bring immigration down to tens of thousands. The recent cries of all the net figures are better. Well, the figures, ladies and gentlemen, are that last year, 497,000 people settled in this country. And I'm not sure even the commentators perhaps understand this. I did an Any Questions debate the other week, and I was talking about Europe and the rights of entry and residence that EU citizens have, and Nick Robinson stopped me. He said, no. This debate is about immigration. It's not about Europe. But it is, isn't it? It's one and the same thing. We've got 10,000 people a week coming into Britain, 500,000 coming in every year, nearly 5 million economic migrants in the space of the last 10 years. It is totally unprecedented. It has never happened before. The effects are obvious in every single part of our national life, with massive strain on the NHS and primary schools, shortage, of course, of social housing, and a driving up, in many cases, of house prices. And I feel very sorry for the 1 million youngsters in this country who are currently without work, and yet we have a massive oversupply in the unskilled labour market coming into this country from Eastern Europe and elsewhere. Frankly, it doesn't make sense, and yet, from the 1st of January next year, the risks are going to increase further. The 7-year transition period for Romania and Bulgaria is finished, and we open the doors to up to 28 million people who, if they wish to come to this country, can. They can access not just the workplace, but they can access, of course, our welfare system too. Now, how many will come, we don't know. The Foreign Office think it'll be about 13,000, but their track record, terribly good. Migration Watch, rather more reputable, think there'll be 50,000 a year for the first 5 years. I don't know. It could be many times that. I mean, none of us know. But why on earth would you take the risk? Now, let's be clear. We don't blame people from Romania and Bulgaria for wanting to come here. Goodness me, I'd be packing my bags now. Well, it is about money, isn't it? It's about opportunity. I mean, you know, a wage here is worth 5 or 6 times what it is in Romania and Bulgaria. And I mean, just think of it. You know, a family in Bulgaria, if the father comes to Britain to work, not only can he earn money and send some money home, but he can claim child benefit for £20 a week for the children. And that, of course, in terms of purchasing power in that part of Europe, is very great. So, you know, I don't want to be anti people from those countries wanting to better their life. Of course I don't. But how can it be right that people can come into Britain and effectively claim job seekers allowance and housing benefit within a couple of weeks of arriving here? How can that make sense, and how can that be fair to our own people, who in many cases have paid, their families have paid into the social security system for generations? I don't think it's right. and I don't think it's fair at all. And I think this is the issue, perhaps, of the biggest disconnect between the political class and the ordinary people in this country. But of course they can't do anything about it, because they're tied through a series of European treaties to a commitment that we have to have the open door. They're not prepared to do anything about it. And I have to say, and I've no doubt that I shall get severely criticised for this, but I have to say there is an even darker side to the opening of the door in January. London is already experiencing a Romanian crime wave. There have been an astounding 28,000 arrests in the Metropolitan Police area of Romanians in the last 5 years alone. 92% of ATM crime in the capital is already being committed by Romanian gangs. And this surely gets to the heart of the kind of immigration policy that we want to run. We should not be opening our doors on January the 1st to Romanian criminal gangs. We need to get back the power to deport those who come here and commit offences. And Mr Cameron, Mr Clegg, Mr Miliband, are you listening? Because we demand action. But we're the only people with a solution, aren't we? Because the only way we can take back control of our borders and we can decide who comes to live, work and settle in this country is by divorcing ourselves amicably from this European Union and taking back control. And I don't want to prolong the agony. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the sooner we do it, the better. We know we've got 67% of the public already on our side. And I think that really, you know, life outside the European Union, I think is a very attractive prospect. I mean, well, after all, we'll save £55 million a day in terms of our contributions. That's not a bad start, is it? And with that money, we could do all sorts of things. We could reduce the deficit. We could reduce corporation tax to 10%, making us the most competitive, attractive business tax place in the world. There are lots of things we could do with that money to make Britain better. What I'm certain of is that we'll get our money back, and we'll get our borders back, and we'll get our parliament back, we'll get our democracy back, we'll get our fisheries back, we'll get our seat back on the global bodies that really make an influence and run the world. We'll have the ability to strike free trade deals with whomsoever we choose. We could be a force for good in the world. We could abolish tariffs on African produce. That would do far more to raise living standards than giving away £1 billion a month in foreign aid. Of course, there are some out there who say we can't go it alone, our global influence will decline if we're too small. You know the sort of people. Lord Mandelson, Paddy Ashdown, Kenneth Clarke, though we quite like him, really. It's just his politics we can't bear. But actually, the Mandelsons, the Ashdowns, the Clarks, they are the voice of Little England, and we are the voice of Great Britain. And let's be ambitious, no longer bound by the ageing and increasingly arthritic structures of the European Union, where growth rates of 2 or 3% are only a dream. Let's get out and engage with the world, the Commonwealth, the up-and-coming countries, the Brazils and many other countries in Asia, where growth rates are running at double digits. Let's not rely in future on a debt-fueled boom to get the economy moving. No more growth through credit card excesses. Let's trade our way to national prosperity by being a global trading nation. And I've no doubt we'll be told, well, of course, if you're not part of Brussels, they won't trade with you. Well, there's nearly 10,000 trucks every day that come up through the Channel Tunnel and up the M20 carrying foreign goods for sale into the British marketplace. I think it's a fair assumption to say, ladies and gentlemen, that they won't stop coming. After all, they sell us £40 billion worth of goods more a year than we sell them. We are, in fact, now their most important export market in the world. The idea that the EU would attempt a trade war with Britain isn't credible and it isn't realistic. Firstly, of course, it would break WTO agreements, but there's a real reason why there'll be no trade reprisals against Britain once we're not part of political union, and it's this. The German motor car industry simply won't allow it. Can you imagine Angela Merkel? Can you imagine Angela Merkel going to say to Mr. Mercedes, well, I'm very sorry, but we're entering into a trade war with Britain. It simply won't happen. Economic logic says we will go on trading freely with the other member states of the European Union without being a member of political union. So it is a positive, forward-looking vision. It is a UKIP that has stopped telling people what it's against. It's a UKIP that has started telling people what it's for. What it's for on the big constitutional questions. And through this conference, you're being told what we're for in terms of energy, the National Health Service, housing, and a whole range of other policies. But it really is only by leaving the European Union that we can actually regain the kind of national self-confidence that we need through our own Parliament in Westminster to do the right things. Now, I said earlier that we are changing the face of British politics, and it's true. And all of our arguments are now gaining traction. In terms of rhetoric, the other parties are attempting to move into our territory. But of course, without the slightest intention of actually delivering. So Mr. Cameron wants a referendum. Well, we've heard it all before, with his cast-iron guarantee, and frankly, we don't believe he's sincere this time either. But of course, he's using a word, a trick word. It's the same word that Wilson used back in the 70s. He's using the word renegotiation. He's saying that it is no more than a cynical tactic, I would say, it's no more than a cynical tactic to kick the issue into the long grass beyond the next general election. And how I look forward this afternoon to hearing Lord Digby Jones on this platform, former Director General of the CBI, but perhaps more significantly, the former British Trade Minister under the last Labour government, tell us what the sheer futility of renegotiation really is. How I look forward to hearing that this afternoon. I really do, and I think now, of course, we're being told that the Tories now believe in a referendum. So if we were to split the Tory vote, which I doubt because we take our votes from across the board, but if we split the Tory vote, there won't be a referendum. Let me make you a promise. I have no doubt at all that by the time the next general election comes along, the Labour and Liberal Democrats will promise a referendum as well. Because they all do, don't they? They all promise a referendum. They've done it at every single general election since 1997, and none of them have really had the slightest intention of ever carrying it through. There's so much talk in Britain at the moment about the next election. And, of course, you'd believe that the next election is in 2015. Can I remind everybody, the next election is on May the 22nd, 2014. The next national election are the European elections, and they offer voters a real chance to express their views without worrying which lot does or does not get into Downing Street. And the campaign next year is going to be dominated by the issue of open-door immigration to Eastern Europe. If the coalition want to save their electoral skins in that election, they must, before January the 1st, tell Brussels that we will not unconditionally open our doors to the whole of Bulgaria and Romania. And that is my challenge to them. But if they ignore it, which I expect them to, then what I suggest we do, given all these broken promises, what I suggest we do is we turn the European elections on May the 22nd into the referendum that we've never had, so that we can express our opinion on the European Union and on open borders. So let's make May the 22nd next year. Let's make it that referendum. And let us use it as an opportunity to send an earthquake through Westminster politics. And let's stand up collectively as a nation and say, we want our country back. Thank you very much indeed.